Hey everyone, and welcome to another CCC video. This one's going to be harkening back to a topic we covered a little while ago, the US Desert Night pattern. We'll be taking a look at 3 primary pieces made by the US military in the pattern, as well as a few from Jordan which adopted and altered its design. If you want to look into the history side of things, you can check out our The History Of video on the topic, link to which can be found above as well as at the end. Anyway though, the US pieces consist of a lightweight overparka, an optional liner for it, and overpants. These were pretty interesting as they served as garments to be worn over the standard desert or really any other uniform at the time for nighttime operations. The pattern on them was designed to conceal the wearer not so much from the naked eye but rather night vision devices. Though they had begun small-scale usage during the 1980s and even prior, they really weren't seen or used in any large way until the Gulf War. However, an issue arose in that they had been designed years before based around older night vision generations, essentially rendering them nearly useless against newer ones seen in the 1990s. This led them to become next to worthless concealment-wise, but the garments themselves helped with many other things not originally intended, such as a throw-on layer for colder temperatures and serving as casual or downtime wear for things like bathing and sleeping. That didn't stop certain forces from wearing them out in the field though. Anyway, this lack of proper use mixed with wide-scale distribution affected its collectability and value in the years following the conflict, in that there were an enormous amount of surplus pieces. We'll circle back on value and the collectability side of things in just a minute though. Let's actually look at the pieces first. To the uninitiated, these pieces may seem odd and confusing as they have pocket flaps but no actual pockets. Well, as mentioned just before, they were meant to be worn over uniforms, and so the idea was that the flaps would open up and wearers could access the contents stored inside the pockets of BDUs, M65 field jackets, or whatever else they may be wearing. But starting off, we have the parka, which is actually based around the older US M51 fishtail one seen during the Korean War and much of the 1950s. These were meant to run a little bit bigger as they were meant to be worn over field jackets and other larger pieces, so they are a bit baggy. They'll have quite a few ways to remedy that, such as adjuster cords. A lot of adjuster cords. There was one for the hood, one for the collar, another for the waist, and then 2 more for the very bottom portion. The front featured a basic up button closure and the 2 flap pockets, each of which were closed by way of 2 buttons as well. On the inside was a tag, which had the official name of the piece, Parka Night Camouflage Desert, as well as the manufacturing date. This one is 1983. Finally, on the inside were a series of buttons one could attach the liner to. Speaking of which, we have the liner up next. Made in the same color and fabric as the ones you'd find for M65 field jackets, these can be easily identified by their longer cut as well as tags which denote them as Liner Night Camouflage Parka Desert. They're pretty straightforward as they simply attach to the parka by way of a series of internal BDU buttons. Finally, we have the pants. Much like the parka, they are made a bit larger to fit over other uniforms, however are scaled the same way as BDUs in that they are measured by waist and inseam. On the tag, you'll find their official nomenclature, which is Trousers Night Camouflage Desert. The waist of them sees a single drawstring adjuster cord. The fly in the pants is closed by a single strip of Velcro, as are the waist flaps, which are again used to access the pockets of pants underneath, along with the ones located on the thighs, used to access mid-leg pockets. Now on the back are 2 more pockets, which are also closed by Velcro. However, these differ in that they are actually fully usable pockets rather than pass-through openings. This was presumably done as it would be a bit of a challenge to unbutton and access rear pockets through an opening. Finally, the bottom of the legs see the same style nylon drawstring as seen on BDU pants. As mentioned in the other video, this pattern had 2 major variations which can be identified by a few means. The most obvious is a slight difference in shading, as well as spacing between the squares, which you can see here next to one another. It seems that this lesser-seen smaller block version was produced only in 1983, which leads us to the second way of identifying it, the DLA code on the tag, which will say 83 for the year. Now, price and collectability wise, these things are all over the place. For a while they were a dime a dozen, especially the pants, but over the last few years they have gone up a bit in value. These are kind of funny as you'll have sellers thinking they are super rare and hard to come by, pricing just the parka and liner north of $200 US, while on the other hand you can find the 2 separately for about 40 to 60, which means that there's
some assembly required.
But if you're able to separately source the 2, you can save quite a bit of money. The main problem is finding the right size, assuming you plan to wear them, but just about all of them can be found relatively easily online. A good conservative price for the parka is about $40 to $50 on eBay and certain websites, The liner is about $10 to $20. The trousers are a bit more common, so average a little less, around $10 to $30 or so. As far as wearing these, there's a whole other element relating to fashion, recycled pieces, as well as custom and commercially made ones, which we'll get to right after the non-US items, which are up now. The two we'll be looking at both come out of Jordan and are pretty interesting for a few reasons. First up is the slightly modified green one that sees the size of the squares being much bigger with the color a bit brighter. It often appears to be the alternate side to a more frequently seen pattern, which is an almost desert design used by the Air Force and certain security forces, though other units have been seen wearing it as well. This jacket is reversible, though seems more oriented to keeping the Desert Night pattern on the inside because of the buttons for the liner and lower pocket count being seen. The second piece, used primarily by the Security Directorate, is more or less the same as far as uniform cut and functionality, but instead sees the colors of the Desert Night design changed to a blue background with white squares. Like the last one, this too is reversible with a darker blue and black dominant DPM-like design, and emphasizing the Desert Night pattern primarily facing inwards. These two coats aren't the easiest to find, but when they pop up, they often sell for around $100 to $175 US, with the Directorate being the rarer and more expensive of the two. Now, the whole reverse usage of these modified variants is an interesting one, and it's not widely known if the pattern is used for the original intended purpose, for identification, or something else entirely. There are a few other reversible pieces fielded by Jordan that are a bit harder to find though. Additionally, as far as non-US uses go, it should be mentioned that a darker grayish-black version, among numerous other patterns, has been seen being used in South Korea by members of certain veteran organizations. Thanks to Discord user Japanon for providing the information about that one specifically. If any of these come across our path, we'll be sure to do a follow-up talking about them. Okay, so now that we've taken a look at the main pieces, let's end this video off on the topic of how the pattern has made its way into the commercial market. Nowadays, camouflage is frequently seen in everyday wear and fashion, but often through made-up or altered designs which were never actually worn by troops. However, there are a few which seem to latch on by way of surplus pieces before they start to be reproduced using older fabric or very well-printed commercially made ones. Obviously, the most widespread is US woodland, but as far as fashion for fashion's sake, a good example is Switzerland's red Liebemuster, also known as Alpenflage. Anyway though, over the last few years, it seems that the Desert Night pattern is slowly becoming vogue in certain circles in a few different ways. The unique design of it is very eye-catching, and because it wasn't created as a traditional camouflage pattern, many don't view it as such, or even realize what it is. For example, the parka here was bought from a second-hand clothes vendor at a flea market. The seller had an entire rack of camouflage and military surplus, yet this parka was hanging up on a rack of women's jackets and button-up shirts that incorporated unique and interesting designs and patterns. Anyway though, there are many instances of surplus pieces being modified by adding things like pockets, higher quality liners, and more features you'd find in a proper and complete parka or pair of pants. These are then advertised as upcycled or fashion-oriented pieces. On top of that, many custom newer uniform parts and cuts such as ACUs and combat shirts have been seen. However, larger, more mass-produced pieces appear to have become more prevalent recently. It is worth noting that commercial pieces such as reversible Gore-Tex coats, boonie hats, and even BDU uniforms have been around since the 1990s, with some even dating as early as the Gulf War. Though some of these were either supplied or privately purchased by forces, the bulk of them were made for the public, with some even showing up in movies such as Child's Play 3. As of late though, the camo has become much more popular across the board, leading to a resurgence in aftermarket and commercial pieces such as sweatshirts, combat shirts, baseball caps, bags, pouches, boonie hats, and even rolls of fabric. Type in Desert Night Camo online and you'll see the vast array of items available in the pattern. Though the Desert Night camouflage was a colossal failure in actually concealing users from night vision devices, the parts it originally was printed on served forces in other ways during the Gulf War, as well as in the following years. Since then, it's gained something of a second life due to its overall look and the history behind it, both for small-scale military and combat scenarios, as well as fashion and general everyday wear. Thanks to everyone who watched, and hopefully this closer look at a few of these pieces helped a few people out. Be sure to subscribe, or at least check back soon for more a close-up on combat clothing and other videos right here on Uniform History.